If you grew up on Rice-A-Roni like I did, and you're wondering if you can recreate this easy side dish at home using homemade, healthy ingredients, this video is for you. If you're new here, I'm Stacy, homeschooling and homesteading mama of 7, on a mission to ditch the grocery store and become more self-sufficient. Subscribe to our channel to learn more about our journey and how we are making that dream come true. I'm going to be showing you my very easy recipe for making homemade wild rice-a-roni, and I'm also going to give you a little sneak peek at what it's like to harvest wild rice. Last fall, my husband and I got the opportunity to go harvest wild rice locally, and it was so much fun. If you are unfamiliar with wild rice, it's actually not technically a rice at all, but a grain, and yes, it's gluten-free. It grows on what looks like long grass and can be found in Canada, parts of the Great Lakes, Texas, Florida, and the Gulf and Atlantic coasts. It grows in rivers, streams, or lakes. The variety we have harvested is found in many local lakes. In our area of Wisconsin, most ricing is reserved for Native American tribes, but others are allowed to harvest rice in certain areas during a short harvest window in the fall. You also have to have a permit, and there are restrictions about the size of your canoe so that you don't damage the rice beds. We were completely new to ricing when we decided to buy a canoe and head out into the marshes. There were a few other people on the lake at the time, so we mostly learned by watching what they were doing and trying to replicate their success. I will say that the pros stand up and use long poles to push themselves along. We got by carefully using our oars and stopping often, but hopefully after a few years of doing this and some better equipment, we'll get better at it. Basically, to harvest the rice, you pull the stalks down towards you with your ricing sticks, and then give them a tap to release any ripe rice heads, which then fall down into the boat. We just got dowels from our local farm store, but people who do this often have fancy ricing sticks. It was actually a very relaxing and enjoyable process, aside from all the bugs that would fall down my shirt and climb up my legs as we went. After we felt like we had harvested enough for the day, we pulled our boat out and transferred the rice to bags.
Not enough for the year? Yeah, right.
Remember that this whole thing isn't the rice.
At home, we spread out the rice to let it dry and to remove some of the little worms that came with the rice.
There's a worm in there.
Yeah, there's lots of worms.
Ladybugs and spiders. This is actually quite a bit.
Yeah, it is.
For the actual processing, we brought it to a local native family. We had considered doing it ourselves, but it sounded like a process that was better done by someone who knew what they were doing, although it might be something we learn how to do in the future. It is actually February and we're expecting a blizzard today as I make this video, but I am already looking forward to harvesting wild rice this fall. So once we got our wild rice back from being processed, I had to figure out what to do with it, and honestly, I hadn't cooked much with wild rice. One of the very few things that I'd had with wild rice in it was wild rice-a-roni, and yes, it came in a box. So I thought it would be fun to recreate that dish. I pulled out my handy-dandy pasta machine, which I absolutely love. I made some thin spaghetti noodles. You could also use like a vermicelli if you're buying these noodles. I just created these here in my pasta machine, dried them out, and then broke them into small pieces. And then I combined these pieces of noodles with my wild rice, some seasonings, and some broth, and made an amazing dish. So I'm gonna share that recipe here now. To make homemade rice-a-roni, you will need dried vermicelli or thin spaghetti noodles cut into small pieces, any long grain rice. I'm using wild rice, but feel free to substitute whatever your family likes, butter, chicken broth, and some seasonings, Italian seasoning, garlic powder, parsley, and then some salt to taste if your broth isn't salty enough. I will leave the written recipe in the description. You're going to begin by melting 3 tablespoons of butter in a large skillet. Then add 3/4 cup of rice and a 1/2 cup of the broken noodles. Stir well. Slowly brown the noodles and stir the mixture in with the butter until the noodles get a toasted appearance, but be careful not to overcook them. You just want a light golden color. At this point, you're going to add 1 quart of chicken broth, 1/2 teaspoon Italian seasoning, 1/4 teaspoon garlic powder, and 1 teaspoon parsley. Mix well, bring it to a simmer, and then cover the skillet with a lid. Turn the heat down to low to keep it at a simmer, and set a timer for 20 minutes. It should take 25 to 30 minutes for the broth to absorb and the rice to cook, but start checking it at 20 minutes to make sure it hasn't evaporated too quickly. And this could just happen if it's boiling too aggressively. If this happens where the rice isn't done but the liquid is gone, just add a little more broth or water and recover it. When the broth is absorbed and the rice is tender, your homemade rice-a-roni is done. Sometimes I will add in some canned chicken for a quick meal, but for tonight we had some fish that the boys had caught ice fishing this past weekend, So we fried that up and it was the perfect combination and such an easy meal. Homemade wild rice-a-roni is a great way to get wild rice into your family's diet. And if you live near a place where you can harvest it locally, it's a fun family adventure that will help you become more self-sufficient as well. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please leave me a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss my future videos on homesteading, homeschooling, food from scratch, and creating a handmade home.